Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The topic of today's lecture is important, and that is related to the limbic system of the body. Now this system allows to detect and respond to the world around us. Now limbic system plays a key role in mood. This is why the psychiatric disorders are associated with disorders of the limbic system. Now the limbic system comprises of various components. What are the components or parts of limbic system? These we divide into three major parts or components. That is outer part or cortical component, of limbic system. Then number two is the deep part, or subcortical component. Subcortical components of the limbic system. Then the interconnecting fiber tracts component. Of the limbic system. So these are the three parts. Now, first of all, the outer component or the cortical component of the limbic system. Now if we cut a section through the midline, cutting different midline structures, we can see the outer part of the cortical component. So you know there is a corpus callosum having different parts: rostrum, genu, body and splenum. And there are also other midline structures. The outer or cortical components they are visible on the medial surface of each cerebral hemisphere. These are in the form of a C-shaped or arched cortex on the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere, located at the junction of diencephalon and the telencephalon, just above the brainstem. location at the junction of telencephalon and diencephalon. Just above the brainstem. And shape, it is a C-shaped or arch-shaped cortex. And what are its different parts? These are number one, cingulate gyrus. Number two, isthmus. Number three, parahippocampal. Gyrus. And number four, uncus. All these are outside and can be seen externally on the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere, especially when we cut the midline structure. So this is a corpus callosum section in different midline structures. Around the corpus callosum, this is a cingulate sulcus. Then here is rhinal sulcus. Then collateral sulcus. Cingulate sulcus, supraspinal sulcus, collateral sulcus, and this hook-shaped rhinal sulcus. So here is arch-shaped or C-shaped cortex just between the corpus callosum and the cingulate sulcus. This is called cingulate gyrus. Then a narrow continuation of the cingulate gyrus is isthmus, and then parahippocampal gyrus, which is continued as hook-shaped gyrus, known as the uncus. Cingulate gyrus. Then this is a isthmus. This is parahippocampal gyrus. And this is uncus. So all these are components of outer part or cortical part, which are all visible around the corpus callosum and other midline structures in R-shaped or C-shaped manner, comprising of cingulate gyrus, continued as isthmus, still continued forward as parahippocampal gyrus, and then in hook-shaped gyrus, surrounded by a rhinal sulcus known as the uncus. So these were the cortical components of the limbic system. Next is this deep part or subcortical components. Deep or subcortical components of limbic system. Now these components, they are deeply located. Most of these components we cannot see. We'll be able to see these only when the brain specimen is stained by various stains. For example, sobochrome stain, etc. But some parts of this component, cortical component, the subcortical component, can be seen externally. Components seen externally. For example, mammillary bodies. This can be seen on the basal surface of the cerebrum, and the mammillary body belong to the hypothalamus. Second, when we will cut the midline structure, corpus callosum, we can also see some of the structures, for example, rhinencephalon. Thalamus and hypothalamus, because rhinencephalon has connection with the limbic system. Then you can see the fornix, then anterior commissure. So these are some few parts of the subcortical component or deep part which can be seen, like mammillary bodies which belong to the hypothalamus, thalamus and hypothalamus, then fornix and anterior commissure. Rest of the parts of the subcortical components can be seen only when the brain specimen is stained. Now, what are the different parts of the subcortical component? Number one, amygdaloid body. Number two, septal region. Then hypothalamus, number three. That is mammillary bodies. And number four, olfactory area. Number five is thalamus. And number six is hippocampal formation. These are different components of subcortical part. Now, amygdaloid body. It is almond-shaped body. Amygdala means element. Located at the tail of caudate nucleus. Now, for example, this is a C-shaped caudate nucleus having head, body and tail. Head, body and tail of caudate nucleus. Then at the tail end of the body is at the tail end of the caudate nucleus is the amygdaloid body. From the amygdaloid body, a number of nerve fibers arise which run along the tail, then close to the body and head of the caudate nucleus. These fibers arise from the amygdaloid body known as the stria terminalis. And they reach a region where the fibers of the stria terminalis reaches and divide into 3 commissures. That is supracommissural fibers, then anterior commissure fibers, and then infracommissural fibers. And they are then distributed to their destinations. Now, where this region is located, where the stria terminalis fibers, they divide into these commissural bundles. Now, the corpus callosum, the fornix, suspended to the corpus callosum by septum pellucidum. Then here is rope-like structure of commissural fibers known as the anterior commissure. Then lamina terminalis. On the basal surface is optic chiasma. Then epipineal, pineal recess, spinal body, and then posterior commissure. Mammillary body, the tuber cinereum, pituitary gland, mammillary bodies, then midbrain section. This is hypothalamic sulcus. Here is thalamus. And here is hypothalamus. This is interventricular foramen, which communicate the lateral ventricle with the third ventricle. So it is here, this region, below the interventricular foramen and posterior to the anterior commissure. In this region, the fibers of stria terminalis reaches and divide into these three commissures. This region is here. Just below the interventricular foramen and behind the anterior commissure, the stria terminalis fibers reaches here, divide into supracommissural fibers, anterior commissural fibers, and infracommissural fibers. These we will trace in detail when we discuss the connections of the limbic system. Now, this amygdaloid body, it is concerned with emotions. Amygdaloid body concerned with emotions. Next is the septal region. Now, septal region. It comprises of septum, pellucidum, number 2, paraterminal gyrus, and number 3, olfactory gyrus. Olfactory, also known as subcallosal. Gyrus. All these three parts belong to the septal region, that is septum pellucidum, paraterminal gyrus, and olfactory. Olfactory gyrus or subcallosal gyrus. Now, septal region, this is septum pellucidum, which is occupied by sparsely dispersed septal nuclei. In the septum pellucidum, this partition, which is attached to the inner surface of corpus callosum and its free borders, gives attachment to the body of the fornix. So this septum pellucidum is occupied by septal nuclei which are sparsely disposed. Then paraterminal gyrus. Paraterminal gyrus. Now one can see the lamina terminalis. Lamina terminalis. And this is the anterior commissure. And this is lamina terminalis. Now in front of the lamina terminalis there are two gyri. Two small gyri located on the medial surface of the cerebrum. Now this gyrus, which run parallel to the lamina terminalis and anteriorly, this is known as the paraterminal gyrus. And still in front of it, there is again small vertical gyrus, known as the subcallosal gyrus. Or olfactory gyrus. Because you know this is corpus callosum, and below its level is the gyrus called subcallosal or olfactory gyrus. So the septum, pellucidum occupied by septal nuclei, then paraterminal gyrus, and the subcallosal or olfactory gyrus. These are all components of septal region. Next important part is the hypothalamus. Which portion of the hypothalamus mainly concerned with the limbic system are mammillary bodies, which are two rounded elevations located on the inferior surface of the cerebrum behind the tuberous cinerarium, posterior to the tuberous cinerarium. Mammillary bodies, one right and one left. Which belong to the hypothalamus. Now, because hypothalamus has connections with the limbic system, therefore it also is a functional component of the limbic system. Now, the mammillary bodies of hypothalamus are also included in the limbic system. Now, as I told you, amygdaloid body are related to the emotions. Similarly, the hypothalamus, it responds to the outer and inner environment. Outer and inner environment of the body. And maintain homeostasis. The hypothalamus. What is the function of mammillary body or hypothalamus as far as the limbic system is concerned? It responds to the outer environment of the human body and inner environment, and in this way it maintains the homeostasis. It performs this function by its influence on endocrine system of the body. And autonomic nervous system. So via the autonomic nervous system and endocrine system, the hypothalamus maintain homeostasis. This is the role of mammillary body in limbic system. Next is the olfactory area. The olfactory area, comprise of olfactory bulb, olfactory tract, and other components. Therefore, all these parts of the brain which are associated with sense of smell is known as rhinencephalon or smell brain. Or smell brain is also associated with the limbic system because of some of its few connections. But the rhinencephalon, it is rudimentary in human being. The function, one of the function of limbic system is emotions. So in animals, the rhinencephalon is well developed. Therefore, the sense of smell have its effects on the emotions of the animal. But because rhinencephalon is a rudimentary human being, so there is a negligible influence of the sense of smell on emotions of the human being. But because it has connection with the limbic system, this is why it is included as one of the component of the subcortical part. Then next is the hippocampal formation. Next is the thalamus. So thalamus, just like hypothalamus, is part of diencephalon. Part of diencephalon, just like the hypothalamus is also part of diencephalon. But because of its reciprocal connections with the limbic system, it is also performing its function as component of the limbic system. Next is hippocampal formation. In the last lectures, we talk about the hippocampal formation. What are the different components of hippocampal formation? I will just revise briefly the components of hippocampal formation. right cerebral hemisphere, left cerebral hemisphere. And I told you there are some structures inside. There is a foot-like mass of gray matter known as the hippocampus or pes hippocampus. From it, bundle of nerve fibers arise, known as the alveus. And from the alveus, crus of the fornix arises. And the two crura, they approximate to form body of the fornix. And body of the fornix continue as column of the fornix on each side. And column of the fornix lay the mammillary bodies. Mammillary bodies, right and left, can be seen on the basal surface of cerebrum, and these are parts of the hypothalamus. So this is pes hippocampus, alveus, crus of hippocampus, body of fornix, and then column of fornix. Then mammillary body. Hippocampal formation. The right and left crura of the fornix, they are interconnected with one another by commissural fibers known as the commissure of the fornix. Also known as hippocampal commissure. From the mammillary bodies, mammillothalamic tract arises. Mammillothalamic tract arises from mammillary body, and it really in the anterior nucleus of thalamus. anterior and dorsomedial, anterior nucleus of thalamus, and then thalamus again have connection with the limbic system. This pathway on one side and same is on the other side. So this was the hippocampal formation, which is considered as one of the important subcortical component of the limbic system. Now, what is the role of the hippocampal formation? Role of the hippocampal formation. It is concerned with memory. With memory. So just briefly, the amygdaloid is concerned with emotions, and septal region is in the pathway of connections. Then mammillary bodies is concerned with homeostasis of the body, and very negligible role of rhinencephalon in case of human being, but in animals it has very important effect. Sense of smell has very important effect on the emotions of the animal. Then thalamus, because of its connections with the limbic system, is also part of the limbic system, and hippocampal formation is mainly concerned with the memory. So this was the second deep component or subcortical component of the limbic system. And next one is the tracts, interconnecting tracts component. These bundle of nerve fibers or tracts, they interconnect the different parts of the limbic system. And what are these tracts? The third component. The stria terminalis. Which I just briefly described, these bundle of nerve fibers arising from amygdaloid body and reaches this region, then it is divided into these commissure fibers. So stria terminalis is one of the tracts which interconnect different parts of the limbic system. Stria medullaris, thalami is another important connection. And another important is fornix, which is an important outflow of the limbic system. And just we discussed the mammillothalamic tracts. These are some of the tracts which interconnect different parts of the limbic system, and mainly located nearly the middle of deeper component and outer component. And other very important tract is the anterior commissure. Anterior commissure. So these are the three major components of the limbic system. Number one was outer or cortical components, the other is deep or subcortical component, and the third one is interconnecting tracts component of this system. Now just a summary of the functions. Functions of limbic system. Just summarize the function. For example, number one, thirst. Number two, hunger. Number three, anger, fear. Emotions like anger, fear, then learning, memory, and the sexual responses. This is just a summary of the functions of the limbic system. Now to make it easy to remember the functions, the word limbic will also help. Limbic. L, learning. Learning. Now, retention of what is learned. Next, I, integration of responses. Integration of responses, for example, olfactory responses, then voluntary or somatic responses, then involuntary or visceral responses. So I for responses, then M for memory, memory, retention of memory. Then conversion of short-term memory. Short-term to long-term memory. Next, B. Behavior. Next, I. Inhibition. Of aggressive behavior. Next, C for control of emotions. For control of emotions. And this is the main function of limbic system. So this was just a summary of functions of the limbic system, and to remember some of these systems, we use the spelling of limbic, which will help you to remember. L for learning, what is learned is retained. Then there is integration of different responses. Olfactory, as I told you, olfactory area has important connection with limbic system in animals, but to some extent in the male. But still it has some responses, olfactory responses, voluntary or somatic responses, involuntary or autonomic responses or visceral responses. Then memory, there is retention of the memory and conversion of short-term memory into the long-term memory, important function. Then behavior of the individual is also controlled. Then the inhibition of aggressive behavior. And lastly, the main function of the limbic system is control of emotions. Control of emotions. Now, because the emotions, they affect the different body viscera. Emotions and body viscera. For example, emotionally, in response to emotions, motility of the alimentary canal may be increased or decreased. Salivation may be increased or decreased. So, and these are the effects of emotions on the viscera of the body. So, because emotion is one of the main function of the limbic system, therefore limbic system is also known as visceral brain. Emotions affect various body viscera, therefore the limbic system is also known as the visceral brain. So these were some of the features of the limbic system, and we will continue with the limbic system in the next lecture, because we have to discuss the circuit or connections known as the Pepys circuit, which is very important, usually asked in exam, and a little more detail about the amygdala or amygdala body and its applied aspects. Thank you very much.